Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most disturbing stories in true crime, Jack Unterweger. His life is a twisted tale that'll leave you questioning how much we really know about those around us. From a troubled childhood to a so-called rehabilitated writer, and finally, a notorious criminal, Jack's story is one that won't be easy to forget. Let's break down who he was, his horrifying crimes, and how his deadly double life eventually unraveled. Troubled beginnings. So, who was Jack Unterweger? Born in 1950 in Austria, Jack didn't exactly have an ideal start in life. His mother, a waitress who dabbled in the nightlife scene, wasn't around much. Jack was raised by his grandfather, and let's just say, the environment was far from loving. With no real guidance or structure, Jack grew up in a household where crime wasn't exactly frowned upon. By the time he was a teenager, he'd already started down the wrong path, with theft and minor crimes. It didn't take long for those petty crimes to escalate. Jack's early years set the tone for what would eventually become a life of violence and manipulation. A ticking time bomb from the start. His first major crime. Jack's first major crime happened in 1974, when he was just 23. He brutally ended the life of a young woman in what can only be described as a violent, rage-filled attack. That crime earned him a life sentence, and many thought that was the end of Jack Unterweger's story. Case closed, right? Wrong. This is where things take a bizarre turn. The writer's deception. While serving his sentence, Jack didn't just sit idly by. He found solace and purpose in the written word. He started writing poetry, plays, and even an autobiography titled Purgatory. His words flowed like a river, capturing the essence of his thoughts and emotions. This book, along with his other writings, gained some serious attention. It was as if his soul was laid bare for the world to see. Critics, intellectuals, and even some politicians believed Jack had reformed, turning him into a poster child for rehabilitation. They saw him as a beacon of hope. His story seemed like proof that prison could transform a man. It was a narrative that many wanted to believe. In 1990, Jack was paroled after 15 years, hailed as a reformed individual. His family and supporters celebrated his newfound freedom. But while the world saw a successful rehabilitation, the reality couldn't have been more sinister. Beneath the surface, a dark truth lurked. Not long after his release, women across Europe, Austria, Germany, and even as far as Los Angeles, began turning up dead in horrifyingly similar ways. The pattern was unmistakable. It turns out Jack had perfected the art of deception. He wore a mask of reformation, hiding his true nature. While traveling to promote his writing and give lectures about his redemption, he was secretly continuing his violent spree. His charm and intellect fooled many. He'd managed to fool the public, hiding behind his image as a sophisticated writer while committing unspeakable acts. The world was none the wiser to his true intentions. A world in transition. The Berlin Wall falls. Now, let's put this into some global context. The world was undergoing significant transformations. The late 80s and early 90s were a time of massive change, especially in Europe. Countries were experiencing political upheavals and social transformations. The Berlin Wall had just come down in 1989, marking the end of the Cold War. This event symbolized a new era of hope and unity. There was a sense of newfound freedom as borders opened and countries redefined themselves. People were eager to explore and connect with their neighbors. But while Europe was focused on political shifts and rebuilding, Jack was moving freely across borders, using this chaotic time to his advantage. He exploited the lack of stringent controls. He was slipping under the radar while everyone else was distracted by world events, allowing him to carry out his crimes without much suspicion. Authorities were preoccupied with larger issues. It's chilling to think about how the broader chaos played right into his hands. The very freedom that people celebrated became a tool for his sinister activities. The downfall. Eventually, though, Jack's dark secret couldn't stay hidden forever. The weight of his actions began to catch up with him, and the walls started closing in. As the authorities pieced together clues, they noticed a disturbing pattern that linked him to multiple murders. Each piece of evidence brought them closer to the horrifying truth. His jet-setting lifestyle and the gruesome nature of the crimes made it impossible for investigators to ignore the connection any longer. The contrasts between his luxurious life and the brutal crimes was stark and unsettling. In 1992, a warrant was issued for his arrest, but Jack fled. He left behind an empty apartment, hastily abandoned, with signs of a quick departure. He went on the run, crossing borders yet again, trying to avoid capture. His life became a constant game of cat and mouse, always one step ahead of the law. But after a tense international manhunt, they finally caught up with him in Miami, Florida, in February 1992. The chase had come to an end. His trial was nothing short of sensational. The courtroom was packed, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The media had a field day with the story of a reformed writer who turned out to be a violent killer. Headlines screamed of betrayal and deceit. In 1994, Jack was convicted of 11 murders. The jury's decision was swift and unanimous. His courtroom demeanor, calm and composed, stood in stark contrast to the brutal nature of his crimes. It was as if he was a different person entirely, detached from the horrors he had committed. The end. Just hours after being sentenced in June 1994, Jack took his own life in his prison cell, leaving behind more questions than answers. His death was the final chapter in a life marked by lies, manipulation, and violence. Even today, people are still grappling with how he managed to fool so many for so long. Jack Unterweger's story is a haunting reminder of how appearances can deceive and how dangerous it can be to take things at face value. So, that's the tragic and terrifying story of Jack Unterweger, a man who tried to hide his evil behind the mask of a reformed intellectual. His case stands out as a stark warning about the complexity of human nature and how hard it can be to truly know someone. If this story shocked you, make sure to subscribe for more true crime content. Let us know in the comments what other cases you'd like to see covered next. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. stay safe, and we'll see you next time.